Class is now in session. Join the Podcast Mogul Phil Better as he gives you tips, techniques, and strategies to grow and monetize your podcast. Live in his Facebook group, The Better Method of Daily Audience Growth for Independent Podcasters. Learn from him and his special guests as they help you become the next podcast superstar. Now, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, podcasters of all ages, put your hands together for your host, Phil Better! Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Invest in Yourself, the podcast series. I am, of course, your host with the most, Phil Better, and I'm so happy to have Mark, Mike, and Will, aka Wise, in the house. Guys, I thank you so much for being here, podcasters. You are the reason why I do this, and I want to help you guys take your podcast from 0 to 1 billion. Yeah, that's the goal, to help 1 billion podcasters out, or just help a podcaster make 1 billion, whichever comes first. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you so much for tuning in live to today's episode. If you're listening on the podcast version, you know, you want to be in the group, the Phil Better Method of Daily Audience Growth, podcast growth, whatever it is. The links are in the show notes down below. You know how it is. I am here to teach you guys. Is that you in your intro? Yes, Will, it is. If you're looking for help with your intro, I'll be more than happy to do it. I've been told I have a very seductive voice and I can do some crazy little things with it. So if you need a high voice, I got you there. But ladies and gentlemen, that is not me pitching me to be doing your intros and outros and all the wonderful things for you today. I'm going to change your mindset, because everything you know about podcasting is wrong, people. You're completely wrong. Mike, thank you so much. Mike is saying, by the way, that intro was pretty dope, Phil. Thank you. I did it with Capwing and another website that gave me some free stock footage. I just used my voice, cleaned it up in Audacity, and then put it together. Maybe I'll put an episode together for it. If you guys like it, leave a comment if you want me to teach you how to do a crazy cool intro. I may do a contest where I may do your intro for you. But today is specifically about changing your mindset, because a lot of podcasters I've recently talked to in the DMs, on the consults that I offer, 15 minutes. You just head into the show notes, book 15 minutes. I'll be more than happy to help you get an action plan to take your podcast from 0 to 1 billion. But here's the thing. A lot of the podcasters that I come and I talk to, they don't understand that they don't have a podcast. Okay. You have to change your mind about podcasting. Everything. Podcasting is an industry. Okay. We are now an industry. We are, at least, according to Apple, we got like close to 4 million podcasts, maybe. I don't know, 3 to 4 million podcasts out there. I know my good buddy Alex Sanfilipino, I believe is his last name, not sure, but he does Pod Pros. He's an amazing guy. You should check him out. And Podmatch, I believe, is his guesting platform. But he actually thinks there's even less than that. They're active podcasters. We're in the 300,000, like from 30 to 300,000. We're really small. And this is really important, because if you start thinking that your podcast isn't just a podcast, but it's a business, your podcast is a business. This is how you have to think of your podcast. Because the minute you start thinking of your podcast as a business, things start changing. Because now your product is the audio content that you put out. That's right. Your product that you put out and people consume is your product. Okay. It's your audio, this voice that's traveling off. If you're listening to this episode on Podopolo, which you should be, because it's the only app that pays podcasters. So make sure you go over to podopolo.co. The show notes will have a link so that you can use my name for a referral, and you're going to help me make some money from them. Because if you guys download from my referral link, they pay me because I'm an ambassador. So that's Podopolo. That's another way to make money. I talked about it. There's a previous episode with Rob Actis that is pinned to the top of the group. So make sure you're in the group to see that episode. But anyways, your podcast is a business. You provide content, and people pay you with either their time listening or maybe their email address. They pay you with the attention, at least giving you some sort of currency in return. Okay. So the minute you start thinking of your podcast as a business, now your studio, the time you record, that's your business meeting, right? Beforehand, all the way up to when you record, right? Every single day, you should be doing something to improve your podcast. So either, think about learning how to market your podcast. So look at how to market a business, because then you start marketing your podcast as a business. You start treating it like a business, and you start treating it more serious, because that's what it takes. You need to take your podcast, if you want it to grow and be successful faster than just organically, you need to treat it like a business. What do business people do to market their products? What does Nike do to market their product? Their shoes. They get endorsements, they advertise, they know their market, they know their ideal client, they know their ideal market, they know their niche, everything. Before they jump into a place, they make sure that they understand the market they're going into. So with your podcast, you have to look at the market you're going into. If it's a comic book movie podcast, then you know your market is comic books, and your ideal listener is somewhere in there. If you do like my buddy Mike, who's shouting out that it's right, he has a podcast helping people, the average Joe, the average Joe finance podcast, helping average Joes like you and me take our finances to the next level, how to invest properly, use real estate. And so that's his business. That's what he teaches people. He wants them to learn, and then they come into his business when they listen to go to his, sorry, going all over the place. They listen to his podcast, and then in his podcast, he has calls to action, or one calls to action. Mike, you're my guy. I love your podcast. I gotta shout you out. You're amazing podcast. Next to Lloyd, Mike and Lloyd's are the two. Lloyd Ross, the Millionaire Money Mentor, are the two podcasts that I religiously listen to when they drop a new episode. Mike's, I may not listen to the whole thing, but I do look for his episodes that intrigue me, that are for me, the ones that are for me, because obviously Mike has an interview-based podcast like I do, and he interviews a lot of successful people who have come out of the average Joe to be successful, but not all of them resonate with me. But some of them do. So I listen to Mike's podcast, always subscribe to it so that I know who's coming up and I can see that. And I go, okay, I want to listen to this guy because this guy or this girl or this individual. So Mike knows his product, and he puts out his product really well, and he has marketing behind it. That's what you want to do. Is when you have your product, which is your podcast, that's your freemium, right? You give your podcast away for free in hopes that people give you their time. They pay you in their time and their email. Once you get their email, then you can start sending them regular emails, but not just saying, hey, listen to my new episode. No. If you think about it, the emails that I send you, if you're on my email list, it's, hey, here's a way to monetize your podcast if you're in a specific niche on Mondays. On Wednesday, I ask you a question that will relate to on the Friday live. So I can get your feedback so that I can make sure that my episode is the best for you. I always look to make my product the best for my listener, my client, my customer. So start thinking of your podcast as a business. And if it's hard to conceptualize it as a regular business, like a brick and mortar, think of it as a radio station. Right now, I'm in my studio. Like a radio station has studios, I have a studio. They put out radio audio drama or interviews. I put out solo episodes or audio dramas or interviews. Okay. And if you look at it, radioers have been going over to podcasting because they realize the streaming, the replayability of the episodes, that's where you can make your money. That is where the science behind your growth is. Because every single episode you have has a golden piece of nugget that may answer a question for someone out there. So when you're hopping around and you're thinking about, oh, I have this perfect product, this episode right here, this is a perfect example. This episode helps people understand that their podcast episodes are products that they sell and only ask for your time, their customers' time. So I have an episode on Investing Yourself, the Digital Entrepreneur podcast. It's with Ralph Sutton. It's the second or third episode. It's in the first, it's not the trailer, but the first 3 episodes I dropped, where he talks about how he monetized his podcast before he was even huge. This was when it was just beginning. He went to his boss. And so what I did was I knew that was a valuable product. That is a valuable commodity. A lot of people want to know how to monetize their podcast. And he got it by sponsorship. And I followed his rules. I followed exactly what he did, and I got my first sponsor. Right there. Salar Rugby. If you notice, I talked to Dom Einhorn in that season. I believe he was season 2's ending guest. He talks about how doing a startup is. And that's great, because if I have anybody who, anyways, as I was saying, Ralph talked about how he monetized his podcast. Then I saw some people ask questions about monetizing their podcast. I didn't have an idea. I only knew Ralph's way of monetizing. Hi, Sarah. Thank you so much. SJ Child's Show is an amazing podcast. That's the show that Sarah herself hosts. You should really check it out. She does some amazing work in the neurodivergent field. So on the spectrum. So you should really check out her podcast and the work that she does. But as I was saying, someone asked, like, how do I monetize my podcast? So I responded, I'm like, hey, I just interviewed an amazing entrepreneur named Ralph Sutton. He hosts the Gas Digital. He's one of the founders of the Gas Digital Network, and he does SDR podcast. Just promoting people who deserve it. Sarah, your podcast does amazing work, and you're helping amazing people, so you deserve it. But yes, I said who he was, what he does, and what podcast he hosts, and I'm like, this is how he got his first sponsor. He went up to the boss of his local business that he was working at. It was a strip club, because he's a DJ and he was DJing there. And he's like, hey, boss, I have a podcast. It's huge in New York, in the Jersey area. The strip club was in Jersey. And he's like, I would love for you to sponsor. And the boss was like, yeah, how much? Ralph said $25. I believe, I'm a little hazy, it's been a while, and there's been at least over 150 episodes released since then. I believe he said, okay, cool, I'll buy 4. And he gave Ralph $100 right there for the month. And that's how Ralph got his first sponsor. I even went to, speaking of this method, a lot of people loved it. And I said, hey, if you wanted more info, let me know and I'll post the link. And people wanted the link. And I got an extra 36 downloads on that one episode. Now, you say, okay, that worked for one person. In actuality, I gave the same advice to Sarah. And Sarah went and got herself a sponsor for her podcast when it was still small. And they were a year. If I'm not mistaken, Sarah, and please correct me if I'm wrong, and if Sarah posts here that I'm wrong, I believe they bought for the year. Correct, Sarah, or was it just for a month? I'm not. I'm a little hazy, but I know they bought for a period of time. It wasn't just one episode. So that's what you guys can do as well. Yeah. So it was. So I was right. It was for the year. They bought for a year. Think about that. All she did was go to a local business and say, hey, I have this podcast. I would love you to sponsor here XYZs. And they said yes, and they became a yearly sponsor. That is what you guys can do when you change your mindset about your podcast. Your podcast is no longer your podcast is no longer simply a podcast, something that you do for fun. It is now a business. The minute you start thinking of your podcast as a business and the episodes as the product that you sell, that is the minute you can look at how to grow your podcast to the levels that they need to grow. So, how long have we been going? We got 14 minutes. Okay, we're good. Your podcast episodes are the product that you deliver. Your podcast is the company. You are the CEO as well as the employee, aka host. It's your job to figure out, once you've done the episode, go back into CEO mode and start marketing your podcast. If you want some help marketing, look at Dan Sullivan, Dan Kennedy. These are some major names in the marketing world. You can listen to Neil Patel. He's an amazing marketer. There are thousands of marketers out there that you can find that can help you learn to market your podcast. Okay. I'm, of course, Phil Better, the podcast mogul. I'm always here to help you grow, monetize your podcast, because I'm looking to help at least one podcast reach $1 billion, or at least make 1 billion podcasts out there. I want to thank you so much for listening today, guys. Remember, if you want to grow your podcast, you got to change the way you think about your podcast. If you're looking for help, make sure you join my Facebook group. The link is in the show notes down below. And as always, I offer free consulting. Just head over to philbetterinc.com/consult, and you can get your free 15 minutes with me, and I'll give you an action plan that will take you to the moon. And remember, always, always to invest in yourself.